لله رب العالمين والحمد لله الذي دل على وجوب وجوده افتقار الممكنات وعلى قدرته وعلمه أحكام المصنوعات المتعالي عن مشابهة الجسمانيات المنزه بجلال قدسه عن مناسبة الناقصات نحمده حمدا يملأ أقطار الأرض والسماوات ونشكره شكرا على نعمه المتظاهرات المتواترات والصلاة والسلام على إمام القبلتين ونبي الحرمين وأفضل الثقلين وجد الحسن والحسين الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الصادقين والذين ذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد فقد قال الله في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ذلك ومن يعظم شعائر الله فإنها من تقوى القلوب صدق الله العلي العظيم. For the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the love of Sayyid al-Shuhada, one more salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the love of Fatima al-Zahra, one louder salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Indeed, when you examine the events of recent Islamic history, you'll begin to see that one of the most devastating events was the destruction of the Baqee cemetery within Hijaz. And not only the destruction of the Baqee cemetery, but the continued destruction of Islamic heritage. For example, when you look, you find that the home of Amir al-Mu'mineen, where Imam Hassan and Hussein were born, has been destroyed. You look at that home where the uncle of the Prophet Hamza, Sayyid al-Shuhada, used to live, has been destroyed. You look at, for example, the home of Khadija, the wife of the Prophet, the first lady within the religion of Islam, has been destroyed. You look at the home of the mother of the Prophet, the one who gave birth towards the greatest of God's creation. You find her home has been destroyed. Further than that, you find that a number of different mosques, for example, the Rajatul Shams Mosque, where the sun it returned, was destroyed. The Salman al-Farsi Mosque, the home of Imam al-Sadiq, the complex of Banu Hashim, and the list it goes on. You see, the destruction of Islamic heritage which is occurring is something which hurts the heart of an individual. Because when you look at every society, every nation, you find that they seek to protect their heritage. Why? Because number one, it serves as a reminder towards those who contributed towards their society. It serves as a reminder towards those events which became their identity. And each nation has this way of respecting those signs. For example, even in America, when you look, you find it is illegal to go and show disrespect towards the tombstone of an individual. That when a regular individual passes away, you find it is a felony in many places to disrespect that tombstone. And you find that it goes up the more the individual is revered. If somebody goes to the Arlington Cemetery in DC, you find that there will be national outcry at this. But when the destruction of of the sites of Islam is happening, you find that there is a silence going on throughout the Muslim Ummah and throughout the world. Because the issue of the destruction of Jannatul Baqee is not just a Shi'i issue, you find that it is a Muslim issue. Because when the shrines in Jannatul Baqee were destroyed on the 21st of April in the year 1925, you find not only was the shrines of the Imams of Ali Muhammad destroyed, but the shrines of the aunts of the Prophet, Atiqa and Safiya, was also destroyed. Where the Prophet's first son was buried was also destroyed. The shrines of the companions like Asad bin Zurara and Uthman bin Mad'un, you find that these are figures that all of Islam respect despite the sect that they belong towards. And indeed tonight, the topic which I picked is examining the destruction of Jannatul Baqee and the concept of giving respect towards the sha'air and the sacraments of Allah. You find this topic is an issue which carries great relevance, number one, because this is an event in recent Islamic history. It's an event which affects each and every one of us towards this day. For when those shrines were destroyed in Jannatul Baqee and those graves, they were bulldozed, it was a part of our hearts that was destroyed. It was a part of our hearts that was broken upon that day. But you find from the second level, we'll examine this topic from a historical basis, a social basis, and a Quranic basis as well. Because oftentimes you find many of those individuals who disagree with tawassul and having intermediation, they'll come forth and they'll bring the verses of the Quran. Now on the outward, the verses, they'll sound very convincing. But if we, the followers of Ahlul Bayt in the 21st century, don't have a grasp of the Quran, you find it will be very detrimental towards us. After all, when you look at the narrations of Ahlul Bayt, how many narrations emphasize holding on to the Quran? For example, Imam Zainul Abidin, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayh. You find Imam Zainul Abidin would state that if there was no human being from the east to the west and all I had was the Quran, I still wouldn't feel any loneliness within my life. You find Amir al-Mu'mineen in his wasiyah towards Muhammad al-Hanafiya, he says, make sure that not a day goes by except that you recite a minimum of 50 verses of the Holy Quran. You know, many of us, we say that if we were alive in the time period of Rasulullah, we would have seen the miracles of Rasulullah. We would have seen the nur from the face of Rasulullah. We would have seen Rasulullah split the moon in half. But you find the reality is that the miracle of God, it's within our home. It remains upon our shelves, that we have the opportunity to look at a living miracle. But we reject this living miracle and we don't give it the right that it deserves, despite the fact that the Quran says that this book is tibyanan likulli shay, that this book is an explanation and it clarifies everything. That inna hadal Quran yahdi lillati hiya aqwam, that this Quran, it guides towards that which is upright. It says وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. What we revealed within the Quran is a cure and a mercy for the believers, and you find the verses, they go on and on. But if we don't have a grasp of the Quran, you find that other issues, they will arise, and one of those issues which we see practically manifested is this growing ideology that led to the destruction of the shrines within Jannatul Baqee. And you find, as I said, we'll discuss this on a number of stages. From the first stage, I'll analyze the ideological premises of Wahhabism and its link towards the Saudi state. From the second level, I'll seek to analyze how the Wahhabi ideology removed the concept of mercy, which was a basis in Islam, and what can we do to counteract that. From the third level, we'll look at the Quranic verses which show and refute this idea of the proper claims they make that we worship the graves. How do we refute that? And from the fourth level, we'll look at the virtues of that lady Ummul Baneen who is buried within Jannatul Baqee and her son Aba Fadl Abbas. For on this night, in these communities, in many communities, when we remember Aba Fadl Abbas, you find the discussion of Jannatul Baqee is at the forefront. Why? Because the mother of Abbas was buried within Jannatul Baqee. It's stated that the mother of Abbas would go towards that graveyard and she would recite lines of poetry. So you find that this issue, it affects us on many levels. But when you come towards the root of this issue, you find it starts with an individual by the name of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab. This individual was an individual whom his own father condemned, and his own brother Sulaiman wrote a book against him. They would say that this individual is a heretic, that this individual is a person whose beliefs are very dangerous. And I'm not using a Shia source. Right now when I'm quoting, this is an academic source that I'm quoting, because the goal over here is to have an academic discussion. You find this individual, history it records, that he would go from town to town. Each town he would go to, he would get kicked out of that town until he goes towards the town of Dariya. You find when he goes towards the town of Dariya, over there he meets Muhammad bin Saud, and an alliance was formed where Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab would govern the religious side and Saud would run the political side. And you find both of them, they benefited from each other. How? You find Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, for the first time he had an individual to fund him. When he has a funder, you find that his ideology, it can spread. And for the first time, the Al Saud family, who was known for banditry, that when caravans would come, they were in Najd. Najd is the driest area in all of Arabia. You find that they would loot the caravans, they would plunder the caravans. For the first time, they have a religious institution which is supporting them. You find there were many bases of Wahhabism that came from the teachings of Ibn Taymiyyah. You find that many of the ideologies of Wahhabism, they refuted what the Muslim world believed in for hundreds of years. That, for example, one belief that came forth is the ideology of takfir. That if somebody does not believe in our concepts of tawheed, they are a disbeliever, giving the right for them to be killed and for their property to be plundered. You know, even them, they don't call themselves Wahhabis. You find many of them, they would call themselves the Al-Muwahidun or Ahl al-Tawheed, the people of Tawheed. But it's precisely this exclusive claim they try to make towards Tawheed that shows the real ideology when they say we are the holders of Tawheed and everyone else is the holders of shirk and disbelief. So you find this was one concept. Another concept is that there is no praying, there's no intermediary prayers at the graves, that there is no intercession, that God has a physical body, and you find the list, it went on and on. But you find one writer, I remember one non-Muslim writer, a Jewish writer, he would write that for the ideology of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab to survive, it was necessary for him to remove the message of the mercy of the Holy Prophet and to amputate the Prophet's personality from the doctrine of Islam. You find the acts that they committed, it goes to show that 1925 was not the first destruction of Jannatul Baqee. Before that, within the mid-1800s, within 1820 roughly, Jannatul Baqee was destroyed for the first time, and it was rebuilt by the Ottomans under Sultan Mahmud II. But before they destroyed Jannatul Baqee, something which people don't often know in the history is that in 1802 they ransacked the city of Karbala. That in 1802, the Wahhabi ransack of Karbala, their own official historian of the first Saudi Wahhabi state would state that when we went towards Karbala, we burnt the city towards down to the ground. We destroyed that shrine within Karbala, taking the gold and killing roughly 20,000 individuals. And history records that 6,000 camels worth of gold were taken from Karbala towards that land. You see, the land of Sayyid al-Shuhada, even in modern history, you find that it was attacked. That you know about the time periods of Mutawakkil, but this is something within the past 200 years. But you find the Imams time and time again, they emphasize the ziyarah of Sayyid al-Shuhada. That you look through the narrations of Kamil al-Ziyarat. You know, Kamil al-Ziyarat is a book where Ayatollah al-Khu'i had a very strong opinion about the authenticity of that book. You know, there's one narration in Kamil al-Ziyarat, it states, the sixth Imam, Imam Jafar as-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. The sixth Imam, he states that the one who goes on the ziyarah of Sayyid al-Shuhada, that time within his lifespan isn't removed from that. Because that is the time he's given towards Hussein. You find Hussein gives more in return towards that individual. That you look at the narrations. One narration will say that when you go towards the ziyarah of Sayyid al-Shuhada, your reward is like one accepted Hajj. Another narration says 70 Hajj. Another narration says that every footstep you take at the ziyarah of Hussein, it's like one Hajj that's been accepted. You know, why is there this contradiction, this ikhtilaf, this difference, that one Hajj, 70 Hajj, every step Hajj? You find the difference, it comes then, that the reward is according to the level of the ma'rifat and the intellect and the intention of that person. The more his ma'rifat and understanding of Sayyid al-Shuhada increases, you find the more his reward for that ziyarah of Sayyid al-Shuhada increases. That's why many of these narrations, when they talk about the ziyarah of Hussein, they use the word arifan bihaqqihi, the one who recognizes the haqq and the right of Sayyid al-Shuhada. You see, people, they've given a lot to go to the ziyarah of Hussein. I remember in the time period of Al-Mutawakkil, that he said that anyone who goes to the ziyarah of Sayyid al-Shuhada, his right arm would be cut. It's stated that a lady, she goes to the edge of Baghdad where the checkpost is going towards Karbala. They said to that lady, "Oh lady, you become old. Don't do this. You know what we have to do. If you're going towards Hussein, we have to cut your arm." She says, "Very well, cut my arm." They said, "Are you sure you want to do that?" At that moment, she lifts her left arm. They say towards her, "No, we cut the right arm." She replies by saying, "Oh man, I already gave away my right arm last year when I went to the ziyarah of Hussein." You see, in all circumstances, the ziyarah of Hussein has been emphasized in this way. And even in recent history, you find, as I mentioned, the destruction of the shrine of Hussein. And this goes to show that these people are individuals who have removed the message of the mercy of the Prophet. It's very simple that if you see the rise of Islamophobia today, if you see all of this negativity about the image of Islam today, how do you counteract that? You counteract that in a very simple way by showing the reality of the Prophet, both his narrations, his incidents, and manifested in your actions as well. That you look at this Prophet. This is that Prophet. It says, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ, that we have not sent you except for as a mercy for mankind. This is that Prophet about whom it says within the Quran, "O Muhammad, if you were hard-hearted, they wouldn't come around you, O Muhammad." This is that Prophet. That when the Quran, it speaks about the life of the Prophet, and it says, "Inna fatahna laka fathan mubin," that we've given you a manifest victory. If you want to understand the reality of the Prophet and the reality of the religion of Islam, look at this verse. It says, "O Rasulullah, we have given you a manifest victory." Now go and read history, what this manifest victory was. Was it the battle of Badr? Was it Khandaq? Was it Khaybar? Was it Uhud? No, it was no battle. If you want to understand the way of Islam, you find that manifest victory was a peace treaty by the name of Hudaybiyah. You see, all of these battles, they occurred. Badr, Uhud, Khandaq, Khaybar, Hunayn. But none of them was called the manifest victory of the Prophet. What was called call the manifest victory of the Prophet was a peace treaty which he gave. You see, Rasulullah, the way of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam has been a way of non-violence. That when you look at Rasulullah and the 80 battles within the life of Rasulullah, you find that they were defensive wars. And even in battle, you find Rasulullah gave away within that battle. He would say, when an individual is running away, don't strike that individual. If that person doesn't have a piece of weapon in his arm, don't strike that individual. Make sure there is no collateral damage. That over here, people within world today, they're able to justify hundreds and thousands being killed upon collateral damage. But you find Rasulullah in that time period is saying that make sure there's no collateral damage. He would say, make sure that no trees are harmed and no vegetation is harmed. That have you ever seen a leader when it comes to battle even giving a focus towards the environment? But this was the vision of Rasulullah, that this is that Prophet. You know, it's stated, if you want to understand the mercy of the Prophet, one day there was a group of servants upon the ground. They said, oh Rasulullah, if we had a home we would invite you. Rasulullah says, what's stopping you from inviting me right now? They say, Ya Rasulullah, we're poor individuals, we live upon the street. Rasulullah says, invite me anyways. They say, Ya Rasulullah, we'll invite you at a different time when we made better food for you. Look at what we're eating dried bread. Rasulullah says, invite me anyways. You find Rasulullah, he sits down. At that moment, a lady is walking by. As she's walking by, she says, Ya Rasulullah, ata'kulu kal abid? That you're sitting here eating like a servant. You know what Rasulullah replies by saying? He says, what bigger servant of Allah is there than me, Rasulullah? You see, when individuals tried to destroy the image of the Prophet, show this reality of the Prophet, and act upon that morality and that way which the Prophet of God he showed, and you find that this destruction of these shrines in Al-Baqee is that destruction was not an endpoint, but rather it was a means. A means to what? A means to removing the memory of Rasulullah and those who are buried underneath the graves. You know, I remember the poet used to say that he would say that when we saw those shrines demolished, we began to recite their praise. For how great must these individuals be if you feel threatened by their graves? That how great must these individuals be that you feel threatened by their graves? You know, oftentimes when you go to Al-Baqee and you try to stand there, there are individuals who stand in front of Al-Baqee and they'll say towards you in Arabic, Ro. What that means is go, get lost, leave. You find they will say that go, for there is nothing here. I replied to them by saying that if nothing is there, you don't have to stand there and say nothing is there for nothing to be there. That over here, if nothing is upon that spot, do you have to post a sign that says nothing is upon that spot? If nothing is there, logic will tell you that nothing is there. But the fact that they have to stand there and say nothing is there is proof to the fact that something is there. Something so powerful that if the remembrance of the message of those individuals is invoked, it will lead to the destruction of their state, which is founded on corruption and plunder. And you find that these individuals, they'll use a number of verses of the Quran to back up their ideology. But if we don't have a grasp of the Quran, as I said earlier, you find that their arguments will look very convincing. I'll give you an example. Chapter 9, verse 84. It says, وَلَا تُصَلِّي عَلَىٰ أَحَدٍ مِّنْهُمْ مَاتَ أَبَدًا وَلَا تَقُمْ عَلَىٰ قَبْرِهِ إِنَّهُمْ كَفَرُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ وَمَاتُوا وَهُمْ فَاسِقُونَ. It says, do not pray over them. وَلَا تُصَلِّي عَلَىٰ أَحَدٍ مِّنْهُمْ مَاتَ أَبَدًا. And do not pray over them who has passed away ever, and do not stand by their graves. Now, oftentimes, they'll recite the first portion of the verse. If somebody comes up to you and they said to you that, look at this verse, it says, do not pray over them who've passed away and do not stand by their graves, you would say that's very convincing. But when you have a knowledge of the Quran, you'll say to that individual, why don't you finish the verse and recite the next part that says, إِنَّهُمْ كَفَرُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ وَمَاتُوا وَهُمْ فَاسِقُونَ. They disbelieved in Allah and His Prophet, and they died while they were open sinners. That if you take a verse out of context, of course it'll sound convincing, but you find this verse had a specific application. It was not for the awliya and those individuals who would guide mankind, but rather it was for those individuals who disbelieved in the Holy Prophet. And you find verse after verse in the Quran, it goes to show the permissibility of building the dari, building the structure. You find the dari is something which was there in the time period of the Imams. You find the Quran in Surah Al-Kahf chapter 18. It says about the people of the cave that there were two groups. فَقَالُوا ابْنُوا عَلَيْهِمْ بُنْيَانًا. That one group says, build over them a structure. رَبُّهُمْ أَعْلَمُوا بِهِمْ. That their Lord knows them best. And then another group came forth and it says, قَالَ الَّذِينَ غَلَبُوا عَلَىٰ أَمْرِهِمْ لَا نَتَّخِذَنَّ عَلَيْهِمْ مَسْجِدًا. You find a second group. When the people of the cave, they go towards the town and they're discovered by the townspeople, you find they go back towards the cave and they seal themselves. At that point, the people of the town, they begin to discuss that what should we do with those individuals. You find one group says we'll build an edifice, a structure over them, but the second group comes forth and it says let's build over them a masjid. You see, the Quran, it gives principles. It doesn't spell everything out all the time, but the principles are everything are found within the Quran. As in when individuals say that you cannot go to the graves and pray over there. I say at the end of the day, when you go to Masjid al-Nabawi, aren't you facing the grave of Rasulullah? That when you go towards the Kaaba, aren't 70 prophets buried by the maqam of Ibrahim and the spot of Ismail in the Kaaba? Isn't this constituted as grave worship according towards that logic? And you find Muslims of different sects, they would go towards it. You find the Sufis will go towards the grave of Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. You find the Sufis will go towards Al-Baqee. As I said, it wasn't strictly a Shi'i issue. But when you continue and you look at other verses of the Quran, they begin to highlight that these places have a value. For example, one verse it says, فِي بُيُوتٍ أَدْنَ اللَّهُ أَن تُرْفَعَ وَيُذْكَرَ فِيهَا إِسْمُهُ يُسَبِّحُ لَهُ فِيهَا بِالْغُدُوِّ وَالْآصَالِ. It says there are houses where Allah has allowed for His dhikr to be raised within those houses, and they sanctify Him within those houses in the mornings and the evenings. You find they come towards Rasulullah. They say, Ya Rasulullah, what are those houses where Allah is sanctified and their names are remembered? You find Rasulullah says the houses of the Anbiya. At that point, this narration from Tafsir Dur Mantur, not a Shia source, a man stands up. He says, is the house of Ali and Fatima included amongst those houses? Rasulullah says, Na'am min afdaliha, that the house of Ali and Fatima is from amongst the best of those houses. If I could request you all to move a little bit closer towards the mimbar, so those who come later don't disturb the majlis. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And this is why the Holy Quran, it gives a principle once again. You find, as I said, this discussion is mainly a Quranic discussion. That the Holy Quran, it says, ذَلِكَ وَمَن يُعَدِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّهَا مِن تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. It says the one who respects the sacraments of Allah, this is one of the signs of the piety of the hearts. That if you want to see if your heart has reached the stage of piety, one of those signs is respecting the sacraments of Allah. But the question comes up, is that what are the sacraments of God? You find the Mufassirin, they came forth and they said that it's not necessarily the signs of Allah directly, but it's the signs of the religion of Allah. Because at the end of the day, everything in creation is a sign of Allah. The entire universe is a sign of Allah. But should you show this great level of respect to everything in the universe, you find that there is a special group, a subset of objects which has been called the sha'air of Allah. For example, when you look within the Quran, it says, Inna Safa wal Marwata min sha'air Allah. That Safa and Marwa are from amongst the sha'air of Allah. It says in another verse, Ya ayyuhalladina amanu la tuhillu sha'air Allah wala shahr al-haram wala al-hadiya wala al-qala'ida wala amin al-bayt al-haram. It says, O you who believe, do not violate the sacraments of Allah and the sacred months and that mark which goes upon the sacrifice at Hajj, and that rope which is put on the neck of the animals at Hajj, and the respected house of Allah. You find that if a sacrifice at Hajj, even that which goes around the neck is worthy of respect, what about Sayyidul Shuhada? What about those places where the members of Ali Muhammad are buried? You know, Ayatollah Mohsin al-Hakim, he got invited by Shah Faisal to go towards Hajj. Initially, Ayatollah Mohsin al-Hakimi refuses that. He says, I'm not going to go towards Hajj on something he sends, for it's upon money of corruption. So you find he arranges for his own plane to go towards Saudi Arabia. When he goes over there, you find at that moment there's a gathering where all of the ulama of the other sects of Islam are there, and you find the Wahhabi scholar Abdullah bin Baz was over there. At that moment, he goes around the table. He says salam to everyone. He skips Ayatollah Mohsin al-Hakim. Shah Faisal says that this is my guest. Why did you skip him? He says, I won't say salam towards him, for he is a kafir and he's a disbeliever. He says, why is he a disbeliever? He says, because the Shia, they believe in the ta'wil of the Quran. The ta'wil of the Quran is applying specific incidents towards the verses of the Quran. It's different than tafsir. At that moment, he said the Quran should be taken literally. That man, Abdullah bin Baz, was blind. Ayatollah Mohsin al-Hakim says to him that if the Quran should be taken literally, then you will be at loss. For the Quran says, Man hadhihi dunya a'ma fahuwa fil akhirati a'ma. The one who is blind in this world will be blind in the hereafter. That means you'll be blind in the hereafter for something you didn't do. You find this was that first incident. But the second incident, you find Shah Faisal. He says to Ayatollah Mohsin al-Hakim, and his student is narrating this, who was with Ayatollah Mohsin al-Hakim. He says that you Shia, it is the 20th century. You go towards your shrines, you're still kissing the gold and respecting this dirt. In the 21st century, we're past the point of kissing gold and dirt and these material things. You find Ayatollah Mohsin al-Hakim, he says, at that moment I did the wasila and the tawassul of Babul Hawaij Aba Fadl Abbas. He says I could have given him an intellectual answer, but he wasn't an intellectual individual. He was a king, so I wanted to answer at the level of his intellect. So to get an answer, I did the tawassul of Aba Fadl Abbas. At that moment, an individual walked in. He said, Oh Shah Faisal, this is one of the oldest Qur'ans from centuries ago. It had gold upon the cover. It had silk within the binders. You find at that moment, Shah Faisal, he begins to kiss that Qur'an. When he begins to kiss that Qur'an, Ayatollah Mohsin al-Hakim, he stands up, he says, Bid'ah. They said towards him, you're Shia, you're the one saying bid'ah. Usually that's our job. He says, why are you saying bid'ah? He replies by saying, because you're kissing this gold, you're kissing this silk. Shah Faisal replies by saying, my intention wasn't to kiss the gold and the silk, it was to kiss the Quran. It was to show respect towards the Quran. Ayatollah Mohsin al-Hakim looks at him, he says to him, when we go towards our shrines in Karbala and Najaf, our intention isn't the gold upon the shrines, it's to show respect to those who are buried within the shrines. You see, this is that answer. This is how you answer with logic. And you find the Quran has made these principles clear. That when you look within the story of Yusuf and Yaqub, you find what happens, that you know the story, I'll cut it short. Yusuf, that's at the point of being the economic minister of Egypt. His brothers, after they had thrown him in the well years later, they come to get rations because Canaan at that time was in a drought. So you find that Yusuf, he says, next time bring your brother, because I give rations according to the amount of people that come. Next time they come, they bring Benjamin. Yusuf, he wanted to keep his brother with him, so he puts a cup within his bag. At that moment, they apprehend him for stealing. You find the story, it goes, the brothers, they go back. Eventually they return. Yusuf, he reveals himself towards the brothers. You know, Yaqub had cried so much that he became blind. The Quran says, وَتَوَلَّ عَنْهُمْ وَقَالَ يَا أَسَفَ عَلَى يُوسُفَ وَابْيَضَّتْ عَيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْحُزْنِ. The Quran says he turned away from them and he said, "Oh, my grief over Yusuf." And his eyes had turned white from what? From his grief, that he had become blind. That, you know, when they say, why do you cry for Sayyid al-Shuhada? This isn't permissible. We reply that a prophet of God in the Quran cried so much that he went blind. Is this not acceptable to cry for the grandson of Rasulullah? You find it stated that Yusuf, he says to him, "Idhabu bi qamisi hada fa'alquhu ala wajhi abi ya'ti basiran wa'tuni bi ahlikum ajma'in." He says, when you go back towards my father, take this shirt of mine, put it upon the face of my father, his vision will come back, and when you return with your entire family. The next verse, it says what? It says, وَلَمَّا فَصَلَتِ الْإِيرُ قَالَ أَبُوهُمْ إِنِّي لَأَجِدُ رِيحَ يُوسُفَ لَوْلَا أَن تُفَنِّدُونَ. At that moment, when the caravan leaves from Egypt, you find the caravan of the brothers is leaving from Egypt. Where is Yaqub? Yaqub is in Canaan near modern day Palestine. At the moment the caravan it leaves, you find Yaqub all the way in Canaan in Palestine. He begins to say that I smell the fragrance of the shirt of Yusuf. If you don't think I'm losing my mind, if I'm weak in judgment. The brothers, they reply by saying, قَالُوا تَاللَّهِ إِنَّكَ لَفِي دَلَالِكَ الْقَدِيمِ. That by Allah, you're making your same old mistake. At that moment the Quran says, وَلَمَّا أَنْ جَاءَ الْبَشِيرُ أَلْقَاهُ عَلَى وَجْهِهِ فَارْتَدَّ بَصِيرًا. That when the person of good news came, he throws the shirt upon the face of Yaqub. Yaqub's blindness, it goes away. I say Allah could have cured Yaqub blindly. He could have cured Yaqub from his blindness directly, but you find that he uses the shirt of Yusuf, because when something has a nisbat and a connection towards a prophet of God or the son of a prophet of God, you find it has blessing within that. But you know, when you reflect upon this verse, correct? It's stated that the brothers were where? That some of the brothers were with Yaqub, some were leaving over there. They were leaving from Egypt. But Yaqub is in Palestine. He smelt the fragrance of the shirt of Yusuf, but those brothers who were with Yaqub, they couldn't smell the fragrance as well. I say smell is a physical reality. That because it's a physical reality, either everyone smells it or no one smells it. But you find in this verse, only Yaqub, he smelt it. It goes to show when some people, they ask that I do not believe in these objects of intercession, but when I ask from them, I don't receive. You find that condition for it is ma'rifat and understanding and certainty within that. For Yaqub had ma'rifat of the status of Yusuf. Because of that, he could smell the fragrance. He could take that benefit. And you find this is that reality. And the Quran, it shows verse after verse towards this reality. But upon this night, you find one of those individuals who's buried in Al-Baqee is the lady Baneen. You know, on the 8th of Muharram, the heart, it doesn't desire anything else than to recite the virtues of Aba Fadl Abbas or to recite the musibah of Abbas. You know, who is Abbas? When you look in history, you find a countless number of prophets have passed. 124,000 prophets to be exact, the Anbiya. You find a countless number of awliya have passed. You find a countless number of awsiya have passed. But if anyone in history has been given the right to be called the lamp of guidance, Misbahul Huda, you find that right, it belongs to Hussein ibn Ali. And the way when you have a lamp, correct, you have the sun. The rays, they come out of the sun. They show the reality of the sun. They reflect reflect the reality of the sun. In the same way, from this lamp of guidance, Sayyid al-Shuhada, you have rays that come out that reflect the message of Hussein. And those rays are none other than the Shuhada of Karbala, that Habib, Zuhair, each of them, they reflect the reality of the Imam. But you find there is an ultimate reflection. In the same way the moon reflects the reality of the sun, there was a moon towards the army of Hussein who is that ultimate reflection, and that is none other than Aba Fadl Abbas. You know, Abbas, that he's called Qamar of Banu Hashim. You know, the Arabs had a way, when something was beautiful, they would compare it towards the full moon. That's why in history, you find the grandfather, the great-great-grandfather of Rasulullah, Abdul Manaf, was called Qamar al-Batha. Batha was a valley near Mecca. You find the father of the Prophet, Abdullah, was called Qamar al-Haram, the moon of the sacred area. In the same way, continuing the tradition, you have the Qamar of Banu Hashim, Aba Fadl Abbas. You know what the name Abbas, it means? You read the surah in the Quran, Abasa wa Tawalla, that he frowned and he turned away. You find that within the Arabs, the bravest species was the lion, that whenever they wanted to show bravery, you find that they would compare it towards the lion. In Arabic, there is a number of different names for a lion, and they symbolize the different state of a lion. For example, you have Ghadanfar, you have Layth, you have Zirgham, you have all of these different names. But you find, you know what type of lion Abbas is? Abbas in Arabic is that lion, when he frowns, other lions, they run away from that individual. And Haydar is that lion in Arabic that when he roars, other lions, they run away. That this is who Aba Fadl Abbas is, lion, the son of a lion. That this is that Abbas who was the dua of Amir al-Mu'mineen. That, you know, I know many of you, you have a special aqidah with Abbas, that on this night you make nadar, you ask your du'as on this night. Many of you, you have hazri upon this night. That Abbas is Babul Hawaij. It's stated by some ulama that why is he Babul Hawaij? He's Babul Hawaij, that upon the day of Ashura, his niece made one request towards Abbas. That request was to bring back water. Abbas wasn't able to fulfill it. But in return, Allah makes him Babul Hawaij until the Day of Judgment. You know, in history, there are certain brothers, when they're mentioned, their brother's name is mentioned next to them. You find that the name of Harun is mentioned. We're not in the part of Musibah yet, but what can I say? There's certain personalities. When you recite their virtues, tears, they begin to fall from the eyes, and Aba Fadl Abbas is one of those personalities. You know, there's certain brothers that their names are mentioned right next to each other. That when you talk about Musa freeing a nation from corruption, the name of Harun is next to Musa. You find the name of Amir al-Mu'mineen is mentioned next to Rasulullah. But where is the name of Abbas next to Hussein? If you want to understand the reality of Abbas, the name of Hussein is that name which gives hope to all of humanity. The sacrifice of Hussein is that sacrifice, that the religion of Islam, it stands on the sacrifice of Hussein. You find Abbas is mentioned next to that Hussein. This is the reality of Aba Fadl Abbas. And you know what people, they don't know about Abbas? They know the story that Amir al-Mu'mineen goes to Aqil, who would sit in the mosque of the Prophet. He would say, "Oh Aqil, I want a wife whose family is from a lineage of warriors." Aqil says, "Come back towards me." When Amir al-Mu'mineen returns, Aqil says to him, "I found a lady by the name of Fatima bintul Hizam al-Kilabiyya." You find her lineage is a lineage of warriors. You find Amir al-Mu'mineen, he marries Fatima bint Hizam, known as al-Baneen. But what people don't know is how long Amir al-Mu'mineen waited for a son like Abbas. Abbas wasn't born within the first year after that marriage, nor the second. History, it records that 11 years, according to some narrations, Ali would wait for a son like Abbas. Which Abbas is this? You know, it's stated on the day of Siffin. When Amir al-Mu'mineen comes out, he was surrounded by his sons. On the right side was Imam al-Hassan, on the left side was Imam al-Hussein. Behind him was Muhammad al-Hanafiya, in front of him was Aba Fadl Abbas, who would hold the flag upon that day. You know, on the day of Siffin, Aba Fadl Abbas would put a covering upon his face and he would begin to fight. The people, they would think that it's Amir al-Mu'mineen fighting upon the day of Siffin. You find that as Abbas is fighting, and he's fighting on the day of Siffin, Amir al-Mu'mineen walks out from the qalb and the center of the army. At that moment, the people, they become confused. They thought it was Ali that was fighting, but right now Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali is standing over here. They say towards him, "Oh man, who are you?" Abbas looks at Amir al-Mu'mineen. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, "Oh Abbas, don't unveil your face yet." They ask a second time. A second time he looks at Amir al-Mu'mineen. The Imam says, "Oh Abbas, don't unveil your face." Upon the third time, Amir al-Mu'mineen gives him the nod, the permission. Abbas, he unveils his face. They begin to say, "Who are you?" He says that I am the moon of Banu Hashim. You know what they reply by saying? They said that we thought that the army of Ali already has two moons in Hassan and Hussein. Aba Fadl Abbas, he says, they are the eyes and I am the hands. It is the job of the hands to protect the eyes. They are the sons of Rasulullah. I am the son of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And it's the role of the son of Ali to protect the sons of Rasulullah. You know, when you look at one of the names of Aba Fadl Abbas, right? One of the names of Abbas is Dahrul Imama wal Wilaya. That Abbas is the backbone of Imamat and Wilayat. You know, it's stated upon the 8th of Dhul Hijjah, when Imam al-Hussein is in Makkah, that Imam, he leaves from Medina on the route to Karbala, he goes towards Makkah. When the Imam is in Makkah, Aba Fadl Abbas, he was greatly hurt that people, they wouldn't see the status of the Imam. It's stated that Abbas upon that day, either he stands on top of the Kaaba or he stands in front of the Kaaba. And you know what he begins to say? He says, Alhamdulillah alladhi sharafa hada biqudum abihi. It says, it's ashara biyadihi ila baytillah, that as he points towards the Kaaba, he says, all praises belong to Allah, who honored this house with the feet of his father, biqudum abihi, referring towards Imam al-Hussein. If you want to see the loyalty of Abbas, if you want to see the wafa of Abbas, can anyone say that Abbas didn't have the right to say the word Abi, that Ali is my father? But no, within this sermon, he doesn't say that Allah honored this house with the feet of my father, with the coming of my father. No, he says what? He says with his father, referring towards Imam al-Hussein, that this is that humility within Aba Fadl Abbas. And then he says what? It says, Kana bil amsi baytan asbaha qibla. This is that house which yesterday it was just a house, but with the coming of Amir al-Mu'mineen, it became the qibla of the believers. Then he says towards them, Ayyatuhal kafaratul fajara atasudduna tariq al-bayt li imam al-barara. He says, oh you disbelievers, oh you open sinners, are you going to stop the way towards the righteous Imam? And then he begins to say line after line. He says, if it wasn't for the mashiyat of Allah, instead of him going towards the Kaaba would go towards him. He says, you see this Hajar al-Aswad, that instead of him kissing that black stone, the black stone would be kissing him. A few lines later he says, if it wasn't that the will of the Imam was in line with the will of Allah. That Abbas, he's showing this line of ma'rifat, that the will of the Imam is always in line with the will of Allah. He says, if it wasn't that the will of the Imam was in line with the will of Allah, in the way an eagle attacks its prey, I will attack all of you. That you are making the same mistake the Quraysh did when they attacked Rasulullah. But at that moment, my father Ali was there to protect Rasulullah. In the same way, you make that same mistake today attacking the grandson of Rasulullah. And in the same way my father Ali was there, I am there today, the son of Ali, to protect the grandson of Rasulullah. You find this Abbas, He gives line after line showing the status that he had. But a question it comes up, that where did Abbas learn this way of loyalty towards Ahlul Bayt? And you find undoubtedly one of the sources was his mother Ummul Baneen. You know, it's stated, when Ummul Baneen, she marries Amir al-Mu'mineen, she begins to walk towards the house of the Imam. When she walks towards the house of the Imam, before entering, she sits upon the doorstep, she begins to cry. At that moment, Zainab and Kulthum, they come out. They say, "Oh lady, why are you crying?" She replies by saying, "How can I enter a house where your mother Fatima Zahra used to be within that house?" You know, it's stated she goes into the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Whenever Amir al-Mu'mineen would call her Fatima, tears would come from the eyes of Ali ibn Abi Talib. She goes towards the Imam. She says, "Every time that you call me Fatima, I see tears within your eyes. From now on, call me Ummul Baneen." You know, this Ummul Baneen would say to Aba Fadl, "Abbas, oh Abbas, never call Hassan and Hussein your brothers. Always say Sayyidi wa Mawlai." Always say Sayyidi wa Mawlai towards them. You know, this is that Abbas whom Zahra would call Abbas her own son. In what sense? You know, it's stated in history that there would be a lady. She would sit by the shrine of Imam al-Hussein day and night. The ulama, they say that from morning to evening, she would sit by the shrine of Sayyid al-Shuhada. One day, she goes to sleep. She sees that Zahra is having a gathering. She goes to the gathering of Zahra. As she goes to the gathering of Zahra, Zahra sends somebody towards her. She says, "Oh lady, you don't have permission to enter the gathering." She says, "Ask Zahra, why don't I have permission?" Zahra says, "Because you would neglect my son." She says, "Oh Bibi, what do you mean? I sit at the shrine of your son Hussein day and night." She says, "I'm not talking about my son Hussein, I'm talking about my son Abbas." That if you really think about it, the entire life of Abbas is a musibah. Why? Because Abbas is the one who was born for Karbala. Abbas is the one who was born to be sacrificed for Sayyid al-Shuhada. You know, Amir al-Mu'mineen had a way that whenever any of his children would be born, he would kiss them upon the forehead. When Imam Hussein was born, he kissed Imam Hussein on the forehead. When Muhammad al-Hanafiya was born, he kisses Muhammad al-Hanafiya on the forehead. When Imam Hassan is born, he kisses Imam al-Hassan on the forehead. But you know what the Imam does when Hazrat Abbas is born? He wraps him in a white piece of cloth. He doesn't kiss the forehead of Abbas. He kisses the right arm of Abbas. He kisses the left arm of Abbas. History, it says, Ummul Baneen, she begins to cry. She says, "Oh my master Ali, every time any of your children is born, you kiss them on the forehead. But when Abbas was born, you don't kiss Abbas on the forehead, you kiss Abbas on the arms. Is it because Abbas is my son, the son of a slave?" Amir al-Mu'mineen says, "Oh Ummul Baneen, it's not that, but it's rather I kiss those arms, for these arms are those arms that are going to be cut upon the day of Ashura." The musibah of Abbas. You know, when Amir al-Mu'mineen was struck upon the 19th of Muharram, the next days were the days of wasiyah. Whenever anyone would come, the Imam would give their wasiyah towards Imam al-Hassan. That Sayyidah Zainab comes, her wasiyah was towards Imam al-Hassan. Kulthum comes, her wasiyah was towards Imam al-Hassan. But you find al-Baneen would wait anxiously, that why doesn't the Imam call my son? She goes towards Amir al-Mu'mineen. She says, "Oh my master, you've given everyone a wasiyah, but you haven't given a wasiyah for Abbas." You know, know what the Imam says? He says, "Oh al-Baneen, call Abbas, for Abbas's wasiyah isn't towards my son Hassan. Abbas's wasiyah is towards my son Hussein." He puts those arms that'll be cut within the arms of Sayyid al-Shuhada. This is who Aba Fadl Abbas is. You want to know Abbas? It was the day of Ashura. Now the musibah of Abbas, it begins. Abbas would watch. As Qasim would go towards the Maqtal, Abbas would watch. Ali Akbar would go towards the Maqtal, Abbas would watch. An and Muhammad would go towards the Maqtal, Abbas would watch. At one point, he comes to the Imam. He says, "Oh my master, do I have permission to go fight?" The Imam says, "Ya Abbas, anta sahibu liwa'i." He says, "Oh Abbas, you're the one who carries the alam of my army." I say, what is the pain of Abbas? You know, in Medina, when they fired arrows at the janazah of Imam al-Hassan, on that day, Aba Fadl Abbas took his sword out. But Sayyid al-Shuhada said, "Oh Abbas, be patient, a day will come." I say, my salams be upon the patience of Abbas. Neither in Medina, when arrows were fired at the janazah of his brother, did Abbas take the sword. Neither in Karbala, when Hussein... You find the Imam says, "Oh Abbas, you're the commander of my army, oh Abbas." Abbas, he looks towards the right, he looks towards the left. He says, "Oh my master, which army am I the commander of?" No one is left at that moment. You know, it's stated that Abbas, he goes towards the tents. When he goes towards the tents, he sees the children with their cries of Al-Atash, Al-Atash. Until that moment, you know, in history it comes when Sakina goes towards her uncle. She says, "Oh my uncle Abbas, can you bring us water?" You find the Imam, he goes toward, you find Abbas goes towards the Imam. When he goes towards the Imam gives him permission. But you know what Sayyid al-Shuhada says to Aba Fadl Abbas? He says, "Oh Abbas, go towards your sister Zainab first before you leave, oh Abbas." The narrations, they state that Abbas, he goes towards Sayyida Zainab. Imagine a sister seeing her brother for the final time. You know what Sayyida Zainab says to Abbas? She says, "Oh Abbas, when my father Ali was passing away, he told me that a time will come, O Zainab, that your hijab is taken, that you're taken through the streets of Kufa and Sham." You know, when my father would tell me that, I would believe him, but I would always think towards myself, how is this possible when I have a brother like Abbas? But today I realize that day is coming, O Abbas, when you won't be here with us anymore. You find Abbas, he leaves. In one hand is a spear, and the other hand you find is the alam with the water bag for Sakina. It's stated using the spear, Abbas, he fights off 4,000 individuals until he reaches the Furat. When he reaches the Furat, the narrations, they state that Abbas, he picks the water up in his hands. He looks into the water. You know, I don't know what Abbas he saw within that water. Maybe he saw the reflection of Sakina, but the Maqtal, it doesn't state. Abbas, he throws that water away. He puts the water in the bag. He begins to go towards the tent. From the other side, Sakina would say towards the children, "Oh children, that's the alam of my uncle Abbas. When my uncle Abbas brings water, I'll give you water first, then I'll drink from the water." You find Abbas goes back towards the tents until that moment it comes when they cut the right arm of Abbas. You find the alam goes towards the left arm of Abbas. Then they come towards the left arm of Abbas. They cut that. You find Abbas, he grabs the water bag by his teeth. But you know which arrow broke the back of Abbas? It was the arrow of Hormala. When it goes into the bag, the water, it pours on the ground. As the water, it pours, all of the hopes of Abbas, they pour with that water. You find Aba Fadl Abbas, instead of returning towards the tents, he goes back towards the Maqtal. You find Abbas, he begins to fight. As he's fighting, one sword hits Abbas upon the head, but then you find the arrows start coming towards the body of Abbas. One arrow, it comes, it goes into the right eye of Abbas. You know, there was a reciter in Karbala. You would be reciting this musibah in the shrine of Imam al-Hussein. There was a scholar over there by the name of Ayatollah Yahya Yatrabi. Ayatollah Yahya Yatrabi, he says to the reciter, "Oh reciter, you don't know if this musibah is authentic. Don't recite this musibah again." Ayatollah Yahya Yatrabi, he says, "That night I saw Abbas within my dreams. He said to me that, 'Why did you stop my reciter?' He says, 'Oh Aba Fadl Abbas, I didn't know if it was authentic or not.' Abbas says, 'Yahya Yatrabi, listen towards me. Know that it's authentic, that an arrow went in towards my eye, but when something goes into your eyes, you use your hands to take it out. I didn't have any arms. I would look towards the left, I would look towards the right, until I took that arrow. I put it in between my knees. Using my knees, I pulled that arrow.'" Using my knees, I pulled that arrow out of my eyes. You find Abbas is laying upon the plains of Karbala. At that point he calls out, he says, "Take my salams, O Aba Abdullah." You know, look at Abbas. Abbas didn't ask for help from his brother, because he knew how could his brother handle seeing Abbas in such a way. He only sent his salams towards Imam al-Hussein. Hamid bin Muslim, he says, as Hussein would go towards the body of Abbas, I would see that Hussein would stop. He would pick something off the ground, he would hold it towards him. Then he would go a little bit further, he would pick something off the ground, he would hold it. Hamid bin Muslim, he says, I wanted to see what was it that Hussein was picking up. As I came closer, I saw that it was two arms that were laying up on the ground. You find the Imam, he comes to the body of Abbas. Abbas makes one wasiyah, the Imam makes one wasiyah. Abbas, he says, "Oh my master, don't take my body towards the tents. How can I show my face towards Sakina?" You find the Imam, he says, "Oh Abbas, your entire life you've called me master. Oh Abbas, for once, why don't you use the line, brother?" You find Abbas. You know, when you go to Karbala today and you stand in Bainul Haramain, one side you see the shrine of Aba Abdullah, the other side you see the shrine of Aba Fadl Abbas. You know, it's stated that the exact same distance in between Safa and Marwa is the distance between the shrine of Hussein and Abbas in Karbala. Which maqam is Safa and Marwa? Safa and Marwa is that place where a mother Hajra would run in between these mountains 7 times because her son Ismail was thirsty. That this was the heart of that mother. I say one line towards you. How many times must Fatima to Zahra run in between these two shrines in Karbala? That on one side her son Hussein was killed thirsty, Abbas, who was like her son, was killed thirsty. You want to know the musibah of Abbas? Now I'll recite the musibah of Abbas. You know, when this caravan returns towards Medina, the mother of Abbas wasn't in Karbala. The mother of Abbas is in Medina. When Bashir, he says his lines, "Ala ya Ahle Yatrib, Qutila Hussein be Karbala." Oh people of Yatrib, the Hussein has been killed in Karbala. It stated this call, it reaches Ummul Baneen. Ummul Baneen, she says, "Oh Fadl, come with me." She places one hand on Fadl. She grabs an asa, a stick, with the other hand. She goes towards Bashir. She says, "Oh Bashir, you just recited the lines that Hussein has been killed. Which Hussein has been killed?" You find Bashir, Bashir says, oh Bibi, the son of Fatima Hussein, the son of Ali Hussein. You know what al-Baneen says? al-Baneen says, Bashir, I don't believe you. How is it possible that my son Abbas was there and Hussein was killed? Bashir says, oh Bibi, Abbas was killed first, then Hussein was killed. After that, al-Baneen says, oh Bashir, I don't believe you. How is it that somebody killed Abbas? Bashir says, oh Bibi, Abbas was struck with a sword upon his head. al-Baneen says, oh Bashir, Abbas was my son. I know Abbas. How is it that Abbas couldn't stop a sword? Bashir says, oh Bibi, Abbas didn't have any arms at that moment. The riwayat, it says, al-Baneen falls on the floor of Medina. When she gets up, she says, oh Bashir, I have one question. When somebody falls, they use their arms to break their fall. My Abbas didn't have any arms. Was it the chest of Abbas, or was it the face of Abbas? Ala la'natullah. You know, at one point, water came into the shrine of Aba Fadl Abbas. They called this famous scholar Sayyid Mahdi Bahar al-Ulum to help with the construction. As Sayyid Mahdi Bahar al-Ulum would stand by the grave of Abbas, a man, he comes up to the Sayyid. He says to him, oh Sayyid, whenever you would recite the Musib of Abbas, you would say that Abbas was a very tall individual. But I have one question for you. Why is it that the grave of Abbas is so small? You find at that moment Sayyid Mahdi Bahar al-Ulum, he takes off his turban. He begins to cry. He says, oh man, I wish you never asked me this question. He says the reason the grave of Abbas is so small, that not only did they cut the neck and the arms of Abbas, Abbas is that shaheed, that they begin to hit the body of Abbas and trample the body of Abbas until the body of Abbas was broken to pieces. That Ya Allah, raise your hands, that tonight is the 8th of Muharram. Tonight is that night we remember Abbas. I know many of you, you have problems within your homes, you have difficulties in your heart. Tonight we put one wasila before Abbas. We say, oh Abbas, we ask through the right of Sakina, oh Abbas. You know, how can Abbas reject when you put Sakina in front of Abbas? We ask that wherever the followers of Ahlul Bayt have any specific hajat that are good for them, granted towards them on this night. That Ya Allah, forgive our sins upon this night, elevate us upon this night, give us the strength to walk upon the footsteps of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad, grant us the intercession of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad on the day of judgment. Which day is that? That's that day, it's stated, when Fatimatu Zahra walks upon the day of judgment. A call will be given, oh everyone, lower your gaze, for the daughter of Rasulullah is coming. You know what the narration it says? It says upon that day, Zahra will hold 2 arms within her arms. As she holds these 2 arms, she'll say, Ya Allah, if these 2 arms aren't enough for the intercession of my lovers, then I also have the shirt of Hussein that I'm wearing. Allah, grant us the intercession of Fatima Zahra upon that day. And we pray for the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم ماتم حسين.